Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press. Day 4 of Diddy's federal trial was already shaping up to be intense. Cassie Ventura was back on the stand, and the courtroom was packed with press, legal analysts, and curious onlookers. But nobody expected what happened next. As the defense drilled into Cassie's past, asking invasive questions about her personal relationships, a name slipped out that made the entire gallery freeze: Michael B. Jordan. Cassie confirmed they had a relationship while she was still emotionally entangled with Diddy. What followed turned the trial upside down. During a tense recess, Cassie, visibly shaken, pulled out her phone and FaceTimed Michael B. Jordan from the witness stand. The courtroom descended into chaos. Diddy's lawyers objected, the judge stormed back in, and the moment instantly became a viral scandal. But what happened behind the scenes and what it revealed about the tangled emotional web between Cassie, Diddy, and Michael was even more explosive. It was late morning when the cross-examination took a sharp turn. Up to that point, the defense had focused on discrediting Cassie's allegations by digging through years of private messages. Screenshots of old texts flashed across the monitors, some flirtatious, some graphic, and many written during the peak of Cassie's relationship with Diddy. But things escalated when the defense asked, "During your relationship with Mr. Combs, were there any other men you were romantically involved with besides Kid Cudi?" Cassie hesitated. She glanced at the prosecution table, then looked down. "Yes," she finally said. "Michael B. Jordan." The room went silent. You could hear the scribbling of court reporters' pens suddenly stop. The defense attorney pounced. "When exactly did this relationship occur?" Cassie explained that during the filming of Honey 3 in South Africa, she and Diddy were growing apart. She was isolated, frustrated, and began speaking to Michael more frequently. Diddy found out. The defense implied that it wasn't just an emotional connection. There were physical encounters too. Cassie didn't deny it, but she insisted that it wasn't cheating. It was survival. "I needed someone to remind me that I wasn't property," she said. Diddy's face remained stoic, but his lawyers scribbled notes furiously. This moment changed everything. It gave the defense ammunition to argue that Cassie wasn't a powerless victim, but someone who maintained autonomy, someone who had options and secrets. It also painted a more complex emotional portrait of the entire case. The woman sitting on the stand wasn't just a victim of abuse. She was someone who had sought comfort in someone else's arms, perhaps while still entangled in a toxic relationship. Court broke for a short recess. The judge stepped out. Attorneys gathered their binders and phones. Cassie remained in the witness chair, rubbing her temples. A bailiff stood nearby, glancing around the room. Then it happened, quietly at first. Cassie pulled out her phone, turned her screen away from the gallery, and tapped a contact. The screen lit up. The unmistakable sound of a FaceTime dial tone began ringing in the nearly silent courtroom. Everyone in the gallery turned. A journalist whispered, "Is she calling someone?" It was too late to intervene. The screen flickered, and suddenly the face of Michael B. Jordan appeared, crystal clear, on speaker. Cassie's voice trembled. "They read everything," she whispered to him. "I didn't know what else to do." Michael, visibly surprised but composed, said, "Cass, this isn't the time. You don't owe me anything. Just stay strong." Diddy turned and stared directly at the phone. The moment his eyes locked on the screen, his calm facade cracked. His attorneys stood up. "Your Honor!" one of them bellowed, even though the judge wasn't in the room. "We object. This is a breach of courtroom protocol." The courtroom erupted. Reporters jumped to their feet. The bailiff rushed over. Within seconds, the judge was summoned back into the room. "Turn that phone off, now!" he ordered. Cassie complied immediately, tears forming in her eyes. The phone was confiscated. The judge issued a stern rebuke. "This is a court of law, not a theater. Any further disruptions will be dealt with harshly." But the damage had already been done. Whispers spread like wildfire. Who called who? What did they say? How would this affect the trial? Outside, someone leaked it. A reporter tweeted, "Breaking, Cassie FaceTimes Michael B. Jordan during court recess." You heard that right. Within minutes, TMZ had the footage. The hashtag #Cassie call began trending globally. Back in session, all eyes were on Diddy. He sat rigid in his chair, fists clenched. For the first time since the trial began, the man once seen as unshakable looked completely undone. His defense attorneys scrambled. One leaned over to whisper something, but Diddy brushed him off. His eyes remained fixed on Cassie. It wasn't rage, it was betrayal. The prosecution moved quickly to refocus the jury, but Diddy was unraveling in real time. When a message from 2009 was read aloud, where Cassie texted, "I'm always ready to freak off," Diddy slammed his hand on the table. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Combs, control yourself." Diddy exhaled hard, nodding, but it was clear the control was slipping. What rattled him wasn't just the texts. It was the FaceTime call. It was the idea that during their most intimate years, Cassie had carried on a secret relationship. That in her most vulnerable moments, she had reached out, not to him, but to another man. And that man was now being broadcast into a courtroom where Diddy was fighting for his freedom and legacy. By the end of the session, Diddy's shoulders slumped. Reporters noted the change. He didn't walk out of that courtroom like a mogul. He looked like a man who just lost control of the narrative. The prosecution, meanwhile, stayed silent. They didn't need to push. Cassie's spontaneous moment had already shifted the trial's emotional tone. Diddy didn't just lose a round in court. He lost the image he'd spent decades building of power, dominance, and emotional detachment. Now, the world saw him flinch. By the time court adjourned for lunch, the world had already seen it. Paparazzi stationed outside had captured the buzz inside the courtroom, and someone from the gallery had leaked enough information to give TMZ exactly what they needed. Cassie FaceTimes Michael B. Jordan in court hit the headlines like an asteroid. Major outlets like CNN, Rolling Stone, and Page 6 scrambled for angles. Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram lit up with clips, reactions, conspiracy theories, and think pieces dissecting every frame of the leaked courtroom image. Outside the courthouse, chaos was immediate. Protesters advocating for Cassie's courage showed up with signs. Diddy supporters appeared hours later shouting, "Trial by media," and accusing Cassie of manipulating the system. It wasn't just a trial anymore, it was theater. And this FaceTime call became the centerpiece of Act 1. Reporters outside speculated whether Cassie had just tanked her credibility, or whether she had emotionally disarmed the entire courtroom in a moment of raw human vulnerability. The press wanted answers. Was Michael B. Jordan subpoenaed? Would he testify? Was the call premeditated? Meanwhile, a new narrative took shape online. Some argued Cassie was brave, reaching for the only person who had shown her comfort during her darkest days. Others accused her of deliberately weaponizing celebrity. "You can't cry abuse and then FaceTime a Hollywood heartthrob mid-trial," one commentator posted on X. This isn't Netflix. Despite the division, one thing was clear. The prosecution had lost control of their star witness, and the defense was going to exploit it. That afternoon, Cassie's FaceTime was not just an emotional hiccup. It was a legal event, now embedded in the minds of every juror, every viewer, and every person still clinging to the fantasy that this trial would be anything short of explosive. As the media frenzy boiled outside, inside the courthouse, both legal teams were on edge. Behind closed doors, prosecution attorneys debated whether to reframe Cassie's testimony and formally address the FaceTime incident, or to quietly push forward and hope the court moved on. They ultimately chose the latter, but not before requesting a sidebar with the judge. "Your Honor," the lead prosecutor said, "we ask that the court instruct the jury to disregard the unauthorized communication that occurred during the recess." The judge nodded, gave a warning to the jury, and moved on. But the tension didn't. Diddy's legal team saw the moment for what it was: a gaping hole in the prosecution's armor. In a press briefing later that day, one of Diddy's attorneys subtly addressed it. When a witness calls a romantic partner during a federal trial in open court, it speaks volumes to their emotional state and their motives. The implication was clear. Cassie wasn't a victim in survival mode. She was, in their words, a willing participant looking to reshape the story. Inside their war room, the defense began plotting their next moves. Their strategy was now built around using Cassie's FaceTime call as a weapon, proof of her emotional duplicity, a sign that she was playing the courtroom, not testifying from trauma. Meanwhile, the prosecution had to walk a tightrope. If they attacked Cassie for her moment of weakness, they risked undermining their own narrative. But if they let the moment pass without consequence, the defense could frame the entire trial as emotionally manipulated. Privately, sources close to the team admitted they were blindsided. "We prepped her for everything," one One insider reportedly said, "We didn't expect her to crack there. Not like that." And Diddy? He wasn't celebrating the defense's advantage. His anger was simmering. He felt betrayed, not just by Cassie, but by the legal system that now seemed unable to protect the illusion he had so carefully maintained for decades. When court resumed after lunch, the jury filed back in. Same people, different eyes. The mood was different now. No longer were jurors simply absorbing Cassie's allegations against Diddy. Now they were asking questions about her motivations, about her control, about her connection to a man as visible and respected as Michael B. Jordan. Two female jurors were seen glancing at Cassie with what courtroom reporters described as a mix of pity and confusion. One male juror scribbled furiously in a notebook, stopping only to peer at Diddy during his moments of silence. The judge's instructions had been clear: disregard the phone call. But how do you disregard something so personal, so unexpected, so unfiltered? Cassie's demeanor had shifted too. She seemed less sure of herself now, still composed but shaken. As the defense resumed their line of questioning, they pounced. "You reached out to Mr. Jordan for comfort, isn't that correct?" Cassie answered, "Yes." Then came the follow-up. "Would you consider that action consistent with someone under complete control and fear?" Objection. Sustained. But the jury had already heard it. It wasn't that they stopped believing her. It's that they now saw her as more complex, maybe more flawed, which, in the context of trauma, isn't unusual. But in the context of a federal case involving sex trafficking, manipulation, and violent control, it introduced cracks in what had previously seemed like an airtight account. The prosecution scrambled to pull it back. "Ms. Ventura, can you explain why you made that call?" Cassie took a long breath. "I broke. I felt alone. I wasn't trying to send a message. I was just scared." But the court was already shifting. The audience, the reporters, the jurors, they'd seen something real. Yes, but real doesn't always translate to reliable. And now, the trial was no longer just about what Diddy did to Cassie. It was also about what Cassie did in response, and what that said about everything they thought they understood. As speculation ran wild online, courtroom insiders began whispering about the unthinkable. Michael B. Jordan might be subpoenaed. By the end of the day, the prosecution hadn't confirmed it, but their silence spoke volumes. Paparazzi footage emerged showing Jordan exiting a law office in downtown Los Angeles. He kept his head down, refused to comment, and slipped into a black SUV. But that one photo was enough. The internet exploded. Would he testify? What would he say? Could his involvement backfire? Prosecutors were stuck between two equally risky options. If they put Jordan on the stand, they'd open the door for the defense to dig into his relationship with Cassie. Texts, calls, and anything that could be construed as emotionally manipulative or strategically timed. The defense could paint him not as a hero, but as a celebrity being used to sway public sympathy. On the other hand, if the prosecution didn't call him, the defense could imply they were hiding something. Behind the scenes, sources close to the trial say the prosecution team had been aware of Cassie and Jordan's past, but they didn't anticipate it becoming a narrative centerpiece. They were banking on Diddy's control, his alleged violence, and Cassie's testimony. Now the trial risked becoming a circus. By the next morning, a new question echoed through legal commentary shows. Is this still about Diddy, or is this about Cassie and the celebrity culture surrounding her? And if Michael B. Jordan did testify, it could either strengthen the prosecution by confirming Diddy's jealousy and abusive behavior, or it could destroy their case if he appeared unsure, distanced, or unwilling to play into their narrative. Either way, the decision to make that FaceTime call had created a potential legal storm, and Michael B. Jordan was now caught in its eye. The next day, Cassie re-entered the courtroom with a noticeable shift in presence. Gone was the sharp confidence from day one. She walked slowly, avoided the gallery's eyes, and sat with her shoulders folded in, a woman who had been turned inside out under public scrutiny. She was sworn in again, but before a single question was asked, she did something unexpected. She requested to make a statement. The judge allowed it. "I want to apologize to this court," she began. "I made a mistake yesterday. I wasn't trying to manipulate anything. I was scared. I needed a moment of clarity from someone who once made me feel safe. That's all." The courtroom fell silent. Diddy leaned back, lips tight, staring blankly ahead. Cassie continued, her voice cracking for the first time in the trial. "There were years where I didn't recognize myself. I was addicted to him, to the life, to the chemicals. I arranged escorts. I set up rooms. I said yes when I wanted to say no. And I stayed because I thought it was love. She began crying, quietly at first, then uncontrollably. The judge called for a brief recess, but before stepping down, Cassie added, "I was jealous. I was weak, but I was also trapped. And I'm not proud of who I became. That's why I'm here now." The defense stood and objected to the emotional outburst, claiming it could unfairly influence the jury. But the damage, or breakthrough, depending on one's view, was already done. For the first time, jurors weren't just hearing a testimony. They were witnessing a human unravel, raw, unfiltered, and devastating. Whether it helped or hurt her case remained to be seen. But one thing was clear. She was no longer trying to be seen as a perfect victim. She was telling the truth as she experienced it. And the courtroom, once skeptical, now just looked stunned. By the end of that day, the trial had shifted from structured litigation to emotional warfare. The prosecution had built its foundation on facts, financial records, surveillance footage, and Cassie's narrative of abuse. But now, with one FaceTime call, one outburst, and one on-the-stand breakdown, everything had become unpredictable. Court insiders say the jury room has become increasingly divided. Some jurors reportedly sympathize with Cassie's pain, while others are debating whether her testimony has been compromised by emotional bias or inconsistency. The FaceTime call with Michael B. Jordan remains the focal point of discussion, not because it was criminal, but because it introduced humanity into a space that often punishes it. Meanwhile, Diddy's legal team has pivoted. They're leaning hard into the emotional manipulation angle, preparing to call character witnesses who can paint Cassie as unstable, attention-seeking, or untrustworthy. But even they are cautious, because Diddy's own image cracked just as violently in previous days. The prosecution still holds damning physical evidence and may introduce new witnesses, possibly even Prince's recording or Cassie's former close friends. Michael B. Jordan's potential involvement remains a wild card. Rumors swirl that his legal team is negotiating limitations on what he can be questioned about, if he's even called. But no one wants to be on the wrong side of public perception in this trial. Not anymore. The judge has now issued a warning to both parties. Control your witnesses, control your court behavior, or I will. This is no longer just a case about a powerful man and a woman he allegedly abused. It's become a saga about what it means to survive, to be believed, and to fall apart in public view. The jury isn't just weighing facts, they're weighing emotions, contradictions, and humanity itself. As we move into week 2, one thing is certain. This trial isn't winding down. It's only beginning, and every person tied to it, Cassie, Diddy, Michael B. Jordan, is facing judgment not just from the court, but from the world.